Hi guys, today we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 3, and Chapter 3 is going to really break down the English colonies, give you a little background information on them, who formed them, why they were formed, and again, we'll see how what's going to become America grows from, a few small settlements along the coast to 13 colonies going all the way from, Massachusetts down to Georgia. Now, the first colony they take a look at is going to be Virginia, and specifically Jamestown. Now, we know that Jamestown is formed in 1607. And again, very early on, we talked in the previous chapter about the hardships of those that were living in Jamestown. But again, within a decade or so, they are able to turn a profit. And if you're able to turn a profit, more people are going to show up. And the thing that really allows Virginia to turn a profit is tobacco. Again, people went there intending to find gold and silver and all the precious metals. Instead, what they find is a soil that is very apt at growing a specific product. And again, tobacco was a new world product. We talked about that all the way back in chapter 1. There were some things from America, there are some things from Europe, and again, now we kind of have that mixing of cultures. So again, there's this huge demand for tobacco products in Europe. So again, everyone wants to go to Virginia and farm this particular product. A couple important notes we see here in the formation of Virginia. One, by 1619, we see the first Africans being used as slave labor. Now, we don't specifically know if this is lifelong slavery, they've been purchased for a permanent situation, or if this is more of indentured servitude, that the settlers of Jamestown have purchased their work for a certain number of years, and at the end of those years, they are free to go. So we don't actually know the answer to that, but we know by 1619, we do start to see Africans being forced into manual labor, and again, that's obviously something that's going to continue in American history for the foreseeable future. One thing we do see, maybe on a positive note out of Virginia, is the creation of the House of Burgesses, which is essentially a local level of government. So again, these colonies, as we look at them, are still beholden to the king, but what we see is they're saying, hey, that king's 3,000 miles away. It's a very long period of time between communications, and sometimes decisions simply have to get made, whether it be protection, farming, trade, anything like that. We need a group of people here representing the citizens that are able to make those decisions quickly. So again, we're starting to see those early ideas, maybe kind of the initial seeds of democracy being planted, and obviously that's going to continue to grow over time. The next colony the book talks about is Maryland. Now, Maryland is unique because it is used as a religious haven for Catholics. So again, we've kind of hinted at or talked a little bit about how England was a Protestant country at this time. There were still people that were Catholics in the country. They weren't treated very well, but they had friends in high places. They tended to have access to a large quantity of money. So one of the things that the King of England did was basically say, Lord Baltimore, I'm going to give you a piece of land, and you and all your Catholic friends can just simply go over there and get out of our hair. Thus, Baltimore, Maryland, right? So again, we start seeing people coming over for religious freedom, and obviously that's a trend we're going to continue to see throughout the colonial period here in America. England does start to slow down as far as colonialization. So looking at 1607 with Jamestown, and again, we're going to see almost a 126-year gap between Virginia as the first colony and Georgia as the last colony. One of the reasons why it's such a slow process here in America is simply that England actually breaks out into a civil war. So again, you have this king being killed, replaced by that king failing. They actually replaced him with the dead king's son. We have this civil war going on. The War of the Roses is what they call it in English history. But again, it really slows down their ability to send supplies, money, military expeditions into the New World because they're spending all their time fighting each other back in England. So again, we do start to see a bit of a slowing down period during this time. The next area we see the book looking at is the Carolinas. Again, originally there was just simply one Carolina. What they found over time is that the people that inhabited the southern part of Carolina were way different than the people that inhabited the northern part of Carolina. The products they were able to grow and the people and where they were from and what their goals were vastly different. Eventually, those colonies do split and become two different places, as we know. We mentioned that Georgia is obviously formed. It is the last of our colonies, and it's really formed simply as a buffer zone. Again, looking at that map, you have French Louisiana, you have Spanish Florida, and again, then you have the English colonies of the Carolinas. And you kind of have this no man's land in there. As far as the Spanish were concerned, it was theirs. As far as the English were concerned, it was theirs. So the easiest way to settle that dispute for England was to hurry up and colonize this, right? Get as many English people as you can in that region, separate them from the European rivals, separate them from maybe Native American American hostilities. So again, we see Georgia being created in that fashion. Now, over time, the colonies really kind of divide themselves up by what they're able to grow, right? So we have those plantation colonies, places where we're seeing tobacco being grown, places where we're more likely to see slavery, places that are eventually going to become the cotton-producing regions in America. Places like Maryland and Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia. Again, fairly southern, fairly warm, hot, humid summers allowed certain products to grow extremely well. The other thing that tended to benefit their production were rivers. You have these very large, broad rivers that flow through these places. It's able to get products in and out. As comparison to the New England region, the rivers are much smaller. They tend to be rockier, shallower, lots of waterfalls. It's really hard to use the rivers up there as transportation. So again, there are lots of reasons why we see farming in these southern states kind of take off during this particular time period. All right, now, it'd be incomplete if we're going to talk about the English colonization of America if we don't at least mention the Pilgrims, right? 1620, the Mayflower sets off with Pilgrims, come to the New World, and obviously land in Plymouth and kind of form that region, and the New England region begins to flourish at this point in time. Specifically, they weren't headed for the northern part. They were aiming more for the Virginia region. They just simply got lost in the ocean and ended up way farther north. What they find is a climate that is not the same as Virginia. Again, they're expecting to have that warmer, kind of growing climate that we may see, and obviously Massachusetts isn't going to be nearly as much. So again, farming is going to be much more difficult. The soil, the terrain is much more difficult to work with. It's very rocky. It's hard to plant things within that territory. So again, the Pilgrims do have a bit of a struggle. Obviously, within that first year, though, they're able to kind of gain their footing. They have the first Thanksgiving, and thus we celebrate that every year as well. A couple other important things. In the New England region, we see, obviously, we start with Massachusetts, but we have places like Rhode Island, Connecticut. All these places basically branch off of that original Massachusetts company, the Pilgrims, that are sent there. So, for example, Rhode Island is formed by a guy named Roger Williams, who didn't like the Pilgrims, who were Puritans. They didn't like how strict the religious rules are. So he simply went south and formed his own colony and called it Rhode Island. So again, you start to see these colonies being formed over time. Connecticut, Rhode Island, again, Massachusetts claims everything all the way up to Maine. There's a little cutout there for New Hampshire. So again, we really see that formation of these 13 colonies over time. The people that form them are slightly different. Their lifestyles are going to be slightly different. Again, far more religious up in the New England regions with the Puritans. Again, way more agricultural down in the Mid-Atlantic region. Some are more interested in trade. Some are more interested in farming. But one of the things that we do tend to see is interactions with Native Americans and how those interactions come about. And again, usually it is friendly at first, which turns into conflict as, again, more European settlers show up. They push further into the interior. They come into more contact with the Native Americans that are living there, and obviously conflicts are going to arise. Looking up in the New England area, the book talks about the Pequot Wars, which, again, were some of the early settlers there, and Native Americans fighting with each other. Things like the King Philip Wars. All right, all of these things are interactions that exist at this point in time. But we mentioned those early seeds of democracy. For example, something is formed called the New England Confederation. And it was obviously the colonies of New England working together for a common goal. Again, protection, trade. So again, it starts to plant those seeds, which again, we're still 150 years from the American Revolution, but plant those seeds that the colonies can maybe do some of these things on their own, right? They're intelligent people. They have a growing population. They have tons of natural resources. Why do we constantly have to rely on England or the king to kind of tell us what to do? So again, these are all things that grow over time and obviously are going to lead to our independence further down the line. The last colony the book talks about is Pennsylvania, which literally is just Penn's Woods. A guy named William Penn, who was a Quaker from back in England, asked the king for a tract of land so him and his people can kind of have their own place where they can practice their religion how they want. King of England grants that for him, and the Quakers kind of move into what we call Pennsylvania modern day. again, a little bit different than what we see. While they are religious, they are nothing like the Puritans that habitat up in New England. So again, even though we're practicing all kind of the same general religion, we're under the same umbrella there, the colonies are definitely different in the way in which they practice those religions or what they're willing to tolerate and kind of deal with when it comes to questions of religion and freedom and all those different kinds of aspects. So again, that is our look here at Chapter 3. Again, just a reminder, make sure that you are doing your quizzes and discussions for the week. Have a good day.